Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. This is episode number 216, and I'm going to start off talking about why when you retire in the year makes a big difference. I'm going to explain the do's and the don'ts and why this actually matters. And then we'll end the episode, probably the second half of the episode is going to be listener questions. We've gotten so many listener questions, not only people submitting through our website, but through email, and then also in introduction meetings with our team at Retire Strong. And what was interesting too, as I was preparing for this episode, and we kind of keep a list of these questions that we keep hearing over and over again, and kind of our rule of thumb is if we hear them 3 times in a week, then that's something that we really need to address on the podcast. And I think that's important to keep bringing up these questions because they can help other people that are in a very similar situation or season of life. And maybe, at least it's my hope anyway, that later on in this episode, as we're going over these questions that other people have submitted, maybe you have these same questions or you're curious about them too, and we can talk about them and discuss them and hopefully shed some light on these popular questions that keep coming up and up. So this is going to shape up to a very good episode. We're going to start off by talking about why the month that you retire or when in the year that you decide to retire really matters and kind of the reasoning behind that. But before we do, I want to just remind, I know we have a lot of new listeners and wanted to toss out this reminder. You can submit your questions to our website, retirestrongfa.com. There's a link in the show notes. There's also a section of our website that has a ton of free resources. It's called the Resources tab. On our homepage, click on the Resources tab. And whether it's our retirement secret sauce, our retirement budgeting tool, guide to Social Security, our 2026 tax planning guide, it's all there underneath the Resources tab. So be sure and check that out. And then for those people that are getting serious about retirement, and maybe you're interviewing different retirement planners, we would love to be in that conversation and have a chat with you. At the top right of our website is a button that says Get Started. You can fill out the form and we can start the conversation that way. Again, we're happy to have you as a listener of our podcast, and be sure to submit your questions. We love to be a resource for you. So when it comes to picking the month in which you retire, many people choose their retirement date around like a birthday. Maybe it's the end of the month, the end of the quarter, end of a company fiscal year, or just maybe a day that they're ready to be done. And what some people miss is knowing that the specific month you retire can swing things like your taxes, your benefits, your income by more than you think. And picking the wrong month to retire can leave money on the table without even considering it or knowing it. So I wanted to talk about this topic and try to explain why I believe personally that the month you retire matters more than most people realize. And then after we talk about all these different factors to consider, that'll help you determine what's going to be the best month for you to retire. But what we find is that there's advantages to retiring at certain points in the year. And believe me, over the years at Retire Strong, we have had clients decide to retire, sometimes unexpectedly, in all months of the year. But there are some advantages and disadvantages depending on when you decide to retire, and that's what we're going to talk about. And one of the things that comes to mind is that you want to start retirement off on the right foot. You don't want to get down the road 6 months later and be sitting there and say, gosh, I wish I would have waited a little bit longer because I feel like I left maybe tens of thousands of dollars on the table. And that's not an exaggeration, believe me. Getting timing wrong can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And when you add up the lost income, the avoidable taxes, and everything else, maybe it's benefits like health insurance benefits, the savings, and just when you look at the math, can cost you real money. One of the things that comes to mind is either pensions or bonuses that you might have. For example, there's some pensions that if you were to retire in January, that would actually count as a full year of service. And so you would actually get a higher pension benefit if you retired in January than if you retired in December of the prior year. Now, that's not for all pensions. That's just for some pensions and the pension calculation. So timing your retirement, if you've got a pension, and looking at the laws, the rules behind that pension of when's an appropriate time or a beneficial time to retire. Because, for example, we had a client that retired, and by choosing to retire in January or after versus retiring in December of the prior year, we're talking about hundreds of dollars a month of pension income that will pay out for the rest of your life. That was kind of the difference. And then also, think of bonuses. We have a lot of clients that get bonuses maybe that are paid out in March, and they will wait to retire in April or May after they receive that bonus and it's in their hands, instead of retiring at the end of the year and leaving money on the table. Now, if your bonus is going to be $40 or something like that, then obviously you're not leaving much money on the table. But we need to consider, of course, okay, when do bonuses get paid? What about profit sharing? When does profit sharing get paid out? Are there other benefits that come once or twice a year? Another thing to consider is health insurance and how it impacts your decision of when to retire. For example, let's say I'm recording this here in the summertime, and let's say it's summer, you've met your deductible, and you say, okay, I want to retire, and I'm not going to take COBRA for health insurance. I'm going to find a private policy or something like that. So keep that in mind. Hey, you've already met your deductible. If you were to delay your retirement, you've got that employer portion helping pay for your group health insurance. And how do we maximize the timing of your retirement from a health insurance standpoint? It's certainly something that we need to consider, and especially if you're married, because the cost of COBRA for two people is a lot more than COBRA for one person. And that's just an example. And for those people that are retiring prior to turning 65 and when they're eligible for Medicare, if they're not disabled, of course, we got to figure out, okay, what's going to be the best healthcare strategy for you to bridge that gap between when you retire and age 65. Another thing to consider is, of course, let's say you retire in the spring of the year, which is my favorite time for somebody to retire. And of course, I'm entitled to my opinion. You may have a different opinion, and that's wonderful. I'm certainly happy for you. But let me explain why I think the spring of the year is a perfect time to retire. So from the emotional side, especially if you live in one of the northern states, we have to keep this in mind. This is the non-financial side to retirement is, do you want to retire in the dead of the winter, especially if you're in a cold climate? I think it's generally speaking, unless you like to do a lot of winter activities or winter sports and stuff like that, generally speaking, people like to retire as they're getting out of winter and into spring, into warmer weather. You're not all cooped up in the house, especially if you live in a very cool or cold climate. So there's that component, right? The non-financial, the emotional. Okay, when in the year? What's my favorite season of the year where I'm going to really enjoy retirement and not, oh gosh, I shouldn't have retired in the dead of winter. I wish I would have worked a couple more months. So when the weather's getting nice, typically that's a good time to retire. And also retiring in the first part of the year from a tax planning point of view, great time to retire. Let me explain why. Let's say you want to retire at the end of March. So you've got 3 full months of earned income. So that's one more year that you can max out Roth IRAs. That's one more year you can max out traditional IRAs, 401ks, HSAs, because you have earned income in that year. Now, granted, it was only 3 months or 4 months, whatever it happens to be. But for most people, you'll be retiring in a partial year of earned income. There's a lot of tax strategy that you can do as far as starting your withdrawal strategy from your different accounts versus if you would retire in, let's say, September or October, where you've already got 9 or 10 months of earned income. You're already retiring in a high tax bracket. And then you're starting off taking withdrawals out of retirement accounts over and above the earned income for those 9 or 10 months. So you're retiring in a high tax environment is what I'm trying to say. You retire in the spring, you're retiring in a low tax environment because you don't have a complete year of earned income. I like the idea just personally. If you're married, you and your spouse can contribute $8,600 to Roth IRAs in this hypothetical year that you just have a couple months of earned income. So that's putting together, $17,200 into Roths, assuming the Roth contribution limit, annual limit for Roth IRAs for people over 50 is $8,600. Also, if you're getting paid out for PTO time, vacation time, and you want to check into that to ask, okay, is this something I need to use before I retire? Or should I plan on being paid out that money once I retire? If it is paid out, it's going to be paid out in a very low tax environment because you just have a couple months of earned income. We have a client who retired in February, I believe. It was the end of February. This has been years ago. But his PTO, vacation sick, all those days, it was $35,000. We suggested to him that, hey, retire in the beginning of the year. He had a very, very good salary. So that $35,000, when it's taxed on just 2 months worth of income on top of 2 months worth of income, versus if he would have retired in December, like at the end of the year, it would have been taxed on top of 12 months of earned income. It would have been taxed at a much higher tax rate. So let me summarize this kind of discussion because there's a lot of factors that we went over. But in my opinion, that sweet spot to retire is March to April every year. Retiring early in the year gives you just enough income to still max out retirement accounts like Roth IRAs and 401ks, maybe Roth 401ks. You can also get a fresh year for your HSA contributions, and being able to max those out for one more year can be meaningful. And it's also nice retiring in a low tax environment because you only have a couple months of income. But then you need to also consider that there's specific times of the year that are going to be good for different professions. So for example, some people will delay their retirement until they've finished a project. And so, okay, I can put a lid on it and I can be proud of retiring on my terms at the end of my career. We had a UPS driver, was a driver for many, many years, and he decided to retire before the holiday rush because he said it was just so stressful. It was the worst time of year to do that job. He just couldn't handle it. One more holiday rush season. So he retired in the late summer. So little decisions like this can shape how you feel about retirement because you want to go into retirement, in my opinion, on a good note with anticipation and viewing retirement as a breath of fresh air. Not an end of something, but really it's the next chapter of life. And we find that retiring in the spring, in the first quarter, if you will, tends to be the best decision for most people. But I encourage you, again, consider all the factors that we mentioned today. I hope that helps. Let's jump into some listener questions. I've been looking forward to this for a long, long time, and I'm going to get through as many of these listener questions as I possibly can. If you have questions, again, submit them through our website, link in the show notes. It's retirestrongfa.com. We welcome all questions, and some people even choose to email or save the questions for an introduction meeting. We've been asking both Kyle and Cheryl to write down these questions that people submit and ask, and we use them on the podcast. So some of these questions, they'll all be anonymous that we go over, but they're going to be from you, our podcast listeners. So thank you. So the first listener question that has come up several times actually over the past couple months is the idea or the question of, should I pay off my mortgage by the time I retire? And really there's no one size fits all, but there's a couple things that I'll talk about that would help us determine what's going to be the best option for you. So one is, we know Dave Ramsey did the largest study of millionaires ever done in this country. What they found was that the average self-made millionaire in this country paid off their home in 10.2 years. That's what the math says. And I know there's people out there that say, yeah, I've got a low interest rate on my mortgage, and if I can leverage and I can do this and I can do that, my money's working better for me over somewhere else. And maybe I'm able to deduct the interest on my mortgage, so there's a tax element to it. And I get all that. I just go back to the largest study of millionaires in this country and what the habits of these people tell us. So it is a natural goal, I would say, for people building wealth in the United States to want to have a paid off home. And I get it. I'm one of those people. I don't like owing money to anybody. I don't like payments. I wouldn't have a car loan for anything. I like having things paid off. Because I know one thing in retirement, you can live on less money, a lower monthly budget if your home is paid off versus if you still have a mortgage. Now, that said, there's a lot of people that are looking at this saying, I got a low interest rate on my mortgage, and if we were to move somewhere and we had to get another mortgage, it'd be a lot higher interest rate because rates are higher now than they were when we refinanced or we bought our current home. And so a lot of people are staying put, and they're getting aggressive paying off their mortgage payment while they have that low rate. So to answer this question, it goes back to your goals. A lot of people have a goal. I want to have my house paid off by the time I retire. So knowing that, that's a primary goal. How do we come up with a retirement strategy to give us the highest probability of accomplishing that goal? And if we did, what would our budget look like having no principal and interest payment on a mortgage every single month? And I've had countless people tell me, you can't put a price tag on having a paid off house, just not having that payment, and just it's like weight lifted off your shoulders. The flip side to this is there are instances where maybe it's not advisable to get in a hurry to pay off a house. One of those is if you're going to be moving in the short term or near term. In that instance, it might not make a lot of sense to be in a hurry to get that mortgage paid off if you're going to be getting into a home, let's say 12 months, 24 months from now, 500 miles away. The other thing is, okay, if we did pay it off, where's the money going to come from? Is it going to be our employment income that's going to help us chip away through extra payments towards principal? Or are we going to take a lump sum from, let's say, an account at the bank, a CD, an investment account, a retirement account? And what are the tax implications of doing so? And what some people find is after you do that analysis, what we find with some of our clients is we wait until the year in which somebody retires where they're in a lower tax situation, and then we get the mortgage paid off with a lump sum distribution from their investment accounts or retirement accounts where they're in a position to pay a lot lower taxes by waiting a little bit. So keep that in mind. There's really, certainly the goal of getting the home paid off, the mortgage paid off, but okay, when is the most appropriate or advantageous time to do so? And that all goes into the strategy. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. This has been years and years and years ago. I remember meeting with a lady that retired. She told me she was going to retire, and this was in the fall of the year. She was a single lady, and she had a very high income. And by the time she met with me, I think it was like November or December of the year, she said, I already retired a couple months ago. And since I wanted to pay off my mortgage, I just took a 6-figure withdrawal out of my 401k and went ahead and paid off my mortgage. And when she said this, my heart sank, but she had a smile on her face because she was happy she didn't have that mortgage payment to start off retirement. But what she did unknowingly is if she just would have waited until like January of the following year where she wouldn't have had all of that income, and because she was a high income earner, if she would have waited to take the 401k withdrawal in January and been in a no earned income that year because she's fully retired, she could have saved herself tens of thousands of dollars in unnecessary income taxes. Because not only did she have that, she was making a few $100,000 at the time, as I recall, and then took a 6-figure withdrawal out of her 401k to pay off the mortgage. So it was stacked on top of that. She was paying out the wazoo in taxes. So sometimes just having a little bit of patience can save yourself a lot of money in taxes. So to summarize very quickly, there are a lot of advantages to having a paid off home once you retire. Without that mortgage payment, you can live on less money. A lot of advantages, believe me. It's just how you go about it is the most critical point. So come up with a strategy that makes sense. Talk to your financial planner so you're both on the same page and you know how to address getting that mortgage paid off. We had one really quick question. This came up a couple times. If you turn 65 on the 15th of the month, do you have to wait until the following month to be eligible for Medicare, or does it start the month that you turn 65? Is it prorated? So this is a great question. So if you turn 65, let's say on August the 15th, you are eligible to be covered under Medicare starting August 1st. The full month that you turn 65, you're going to be covered through Medicare. So really, really good question. You don't have to wait until the following month. That's about as short and sweet as you're going to get on this podcast, because normally I go on and try to over-explain things. This next question we've received over and over again. This is a fantastic question. Now, some people ask it a little bit differently, but essentially what it comes down to is, how much money should I keep as a cash buffer to keep me comfortable? This is my safety net, if you will, which allows me to sleep safe at night. And this is going to be different person to person. How you answer this question is different person to person, just on personal preference. In other words, if somebody wants to have $200,000 in a bank account just so they can sleep easy at night, but that bank account is with a big national bank that's earning 0.25% APR over 30 years, they're missing out on a lot of interest there, or potential growth. And we call that opportunity cost. Versus if someone said, okay, out of that $200,000, I'm good with keeping 25 of it liquid in a checking account, savings account, and then the rest of it we'll invest in a diversified portfolio where we can expect modest gains over the years. Their retirement outcomes are going to be drastically different. But going back to the former person, again, we talked about they have anxiety. It would cause them anxiety if that $200,000 was not liquid in a savings account, a place that they have banked for over 20 years. They're comfortable with that bank. They like that bank. So obviously there's a psychological or behavioral element to this, to financial planning. And that will certainly impact your outcome. Believe me, we've met people over the years that just had way, way too much money in cash that just wasn't earning the interest or it didn't have the growth. And it was really what it comes down to is opportunity costs that they had foregone because they wanted to keep that money in a bank, liquid, accessible, with very, very low risk. Now, with that said, I think what is prudent to do is to look at, okay, nobody has a crystal ball, but look at, okay, what are some big expenses that might come up that I might need to have X amount of dollars in a bank account? So maybe the high ticket items like replacing your roof. Let's say your homeowner's insurance didn't cover that. Let's say you had to replace a vehicle. Maybe you want to have a sinking fund. We always talk about that on the podcast, having a sinking fund for home expenses, home improvements, vehicle funds, vacation funds, Christmas funds, things like that. Big expenses, big ticket items. Maybe you want to have a sinking fund to address all of those. What curveballs could life throw your way, as one of our clients says, that, hey, it's going to be a big invoice, big bill. And it would be nice to have that money sitting in cash, liquid, safe, at a bank or credit union where we could pay cash for those expenses. That's the best way, I think, to address that question. Talk to your financial planner, come up with a game plan. What makes sense? What's your sinking fund look like for new vehicle purchases, home improvements, vacations, things like that? Because, yeah, we would love to have our money working for us as hard as we work for our money. So there's no one size fits all, but I think it's just makes sense to say, okay, I have X amount of dollars in there because I added up all the potential expenses and I added up my sinking funds. I put a total to all those values. That's why I have X amount of dollars in my bank account. It would address all those different expenses. That's a rational, that's a logical way of going about determining how much money to have in the bank. And for the people that listen to the bucket strategy that we have at Retire Strong, that's bucket number 1. Bucket number 1 is your sinking funds, your money market accounts, CDs, checking accounts. That's bucket number 1. The purpose of that bucket is to have the funds accessible when those big expenses arise. The next question is about a decumulation or withdrawal strategy. What is the best strategy? This question, boy, I could talk for hours on this. I've got a YouTube video on the Retirement Made Easy YouTube channel that goes into this and explains some of the differences between different strategies. So let's talk about them. So as far as a withdrawal strategy, it's going to be different depending on when you claim your Social Security benefit. So meaning someone that claims their Social Security benefit earlier, meaning like let's say at 62 or in their early 60s, that's going to look drastically different than someone that waits until later on, like at full retirement age, or let's say they wait until age 70. And so by this, I mean whether they want to incorporate Roth conversions into their withdrawal strategy. Typically, the earlier you are or the younger you are when you do Roth conversions, the more effective they are, because it just gives the Roth IRA or Roth 401k more time for growth, more time to compound. If you wait until later on in life when you're older to do the Roth conversions, they're less effective because they don't have as much time for tax-free growth potential. So for example, if I do a Roth conversion at age 62, and let's say I don't touch that money, I just let that Roth IRA grow and grow and grow, and let's say I live until 92, and let's say I get a 7% growth rate, and let's say I just started with a $40,000 Roth conversion when I was 62. I lived for 30 years, average 7%, that $40,000 would turn into $324,660. But let's say that you wanted to wait to do Roth conversions until 72, and you lived, again, just like me, until 92. That's 20 years. And you did a $40,000 Roth conversion when you turned 72, but you did your Roth conversion 10 years after I did mine. Your $40,000 Roth conversion at age 72 with a 7% average rate of return would turn into $161,550. Again, mine, because I did mine earlier at age 62, it turned into $324,000. You didn't touch your Roth IRA. I didn't touch mine. We just let them grow and grow tax-free. And we're assuming they both got a 7% return. That extra 10 years of tax-free growth was extremely beneficial. Now remember, with Roth conversions, once the money's in a Roth, you're never forced to take a required minimum distribution from your Roth IRA or Roth 401k. So no one's forcing you to take money out of your Roth IRA or 401k at any time. But getting back to the withdrawal strategy, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. You really need to decide or determine what's going to be best for you when it comes to Social Security, because that's the driver that's going to really dictate your retirement income and inevitably the withdrawal strategy that's best for you. Aside from that, if you do have a pension, how that comes into play as well. If you got to wait until 65 to start your pension, or if you can start collecting it earlier, and then kind of determining, okay, what are my different 3 types of buckets? We've talked about this in previous episodes. Your pre-tax bucket, which is your traditional 401k, traditional IRAs, those types of accounts, all pre-tax money. Your Roth, which withdrawals would be tax-free out of those. So that would be a bucket. That would be our tax-free type of account. And then our last type of account is our brokerage, our after-tax. So you might have capital gains, dividends, interest, taxes might apply to that bucket. So 3 types of categories of different accounts. Which one that we draw from dictates the taxes that we pay. Now, some people like to target a specific tax bracket. So some people might say, okay, I'm going to come up with a withdrawal strategy that's going to try to top out a certain tax bracket, like the 12% bracket. And I'm going to do that as long as I can. Other people, they operate on the proportional strategy, which means, okay, if I've got 25% of my money in the Roth, then that means upon retirement, 25% of my monthly income is going to come from my Roth account. If 50% of my money is in the pre-tax, that means 50% of my monthly withdrawal is going to come from my pre-tax 401k. And if 25% of my money is in a brokerage account, that means my monthly withdrawal, I'm going to take 25% of that from the brokerage account. That's the proportional strategy. So they like to go on percentages and try to maintain those. There's other strategies that like use conventional wisdom. This is kind of the old school way. What it would say is that you spend through that pre-tax 401k traditional IRA, you spend through that first. You don't touch the brokerage account. You don't touch the Roth IRA. Once you have completely spent through the pre-tax bucket, then you move on to the brokerage account. And then you focus on spending your brokerage account, your non-retirement account money. Once you have completely spent through that, then you move on to spending the Roth money last. That's conventional wisdom. That was kind of the old school way of thinking. Now, another consideration is if one of your goals is to leave a legacy, to leave money to the next generation, maybe to family or loved ones, maybe you have charitable goals, because that's going to factor into your withdrawal strategy. I know sometimes people like to put those goals kind of in the background, but they need to be accounted for. They need to be factored in to the whole withdrawal strategy conversation. For example, we're working with a couple at Retire Strong that one of their goals is not only to leave a legacy, but to leave a legacy that is as tax-free as possible to their family, to their kids, to their grandkids. And therefore, we're looking at tax strategies that make most sense for them. So that's Roths, brokerage accounts, looking at life insurance, looking at all the different avenues that need to be considered. Because their kids are high income earners and they love their kids, they love their grandkids very much, and they're trying to really minimize the taxes that they pass on to them. So that goal has been a big driver of their overall withdrawal strategy. But again, I'll summarize here because I can get kind of long-winded, I know. There's no one size fits all. Again, what I used to explain back in the old days, 30 years ago, it was conventional wisdom. It was spend your pre-tax money first. When that's completely gone, move on to your brokerage account or after-tax money, and then move on to your Roth very last. You spend that last. And you do it in that order, and you call it a day. And what we have found, certified financial planners, tax advisors, CPAs, enrolled agents, is that there's a lot of times a better way to do it. And if you can map out a withdrawal strategy, what we have found in our experience at Retire Strong is your withdrawal strategy can literally save you and your heirs hundreds of thousands of dollars in income taxes throughout your life and your kids' lives. And it comes down to, again, are we doing Roth conversions or not? When exactly we claim our Social Security benefits? And which accounts do we spend through first? That's pretty much it. So we're going to talk a lot more about withdrawal strategies just because when we're presenting one of these plans to people, I just see the light bulbs go on. Their eyes light up. They're saying, man, look at the difference. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax savings, just by basically cherry picking or having an intentional strategy of how we're spending our money in retirement. This is huge. And kind of a pro tip is Roth conversions can play a big, big part in this. as I talked about, again, the earlier you do the Roth conversions, the more lifetime benefit. All right, one more question, and we've gotten a variation of this question several times from people. Somebody had emailed in with a big, many paragraphs kind of explaining their situation. We had a follow-up phone call. We had a client that was in a similar situation. So in this instance, where mom or dad is in their late 80s, they know that mom and dad are not going to live forever, but they're kind of slowing down. And they've got big IRA balances. And they know that mom and dad, they have to take their required minimum distributions, and maybe mom and dad have been savers. They don't spend a whole lot. Maybe they're very frugal people. And they know one day when mom or dad passes away, they're going to get a big IRA. They're going to inherit mom or dad's IRA, and it's going to be a big amount of money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some case, millions of dollars. How do you plan for that? So what we need to really talk about is when you inherit an IRA from mom or dad, you're going to be on the clock, so to speak. You're going to get a beneficiary IRA, and who knows what it's going to be worth at that time. But you have what's called a 10-year rule. You can look this up, but basically you're going to have annual required distributions from this account. But by the end of the 10th year, you've got 10 years to take withdrawals out of this beneficiary IRA and pay the taxes. But after the 10 years is up, that account has to be depleted. The taxes have to be paid on it. So depending on, the value that you inherit as far as a beneficiary IRA, this can really increase your taxes in retirement. And so your tax liability might be a lot higher than you were planning on. But is it the end of the world because you got this nice inheritance? Of course not. But what I would start to look at is, okay, is there anything we can do to suppress the taxes we're going to have in retirement once you get the inheritance? So again, some people know this, some people don't. But if you're collecting your Social Security, once you hit full retirement age, you can stop your Social Security benefits, and that would reduce your taxable income while you're taking those distributions, those required distributions, out of your beneficiary IRA. So that might be a way to suppress your tax liability. And that would also allow you to get deferral credits on your Social Security benefits until you turn 70, and then you flip the switch back on and you get a higher Social Security benefit once you turn 70. So that's an option. If you're still working when you inherit this big beneficiary IRA, you can offset the taxes on the required minimum distributions from the Benny IRA that you get from mom or dad by maxing out your pre-tax 401k. And that might be an idea to offset, again, to reduce that tax liability if you inherit this money while you're still working. There's also, for people charitable out there, there's some giving strategies that I won't get into because they're kind of lengthy, but that's an idea that would really help you. So really trying to plan ahead for this and understanding the rules that, okay, when you inherit that beneficiary IRA, you're going to have 10 years. And it's when you inherit a beneficiary IRA, it comes with a tax bill. Now, of course, an issue or a problem with the planning is nobody has an expiration date on our birth certificate, so we don't know when this inheritance will occur, meaning we don't know when mom or dad, how long they're going to live. So we don't know when the inheritance will take place. So that's a tougher one to plan for. But again, kind of learning conceptually, okay, how much are we talking about here? Possibly. And then understanding the 10-year rule and any other assets they might have. And maybe mom or dad can do some things now to help reduce the tax burden on their heirs. Maybe it's Roth conversions. Maybe it's things like that. Maybe it's giving. I'm just tossing out ideas, not knowing mom or dad's full scope, but certainly there's going to be some planning opportunities that they can do now when they're in their late 80s. So I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The content in this material does not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific situation. Your results will vary. The hypothetical rates of return used do not reflect the deduction of fees and charges inherent to investing. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments might be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial planner prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance your overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect completely against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Fixed and variable annuities are suitable for long-term investing, such as retirement investing. Gains from tax-deferred investments are taxed as ordinary income upon withdrawal. Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals made prior to age 59.5 are subject to a 10% IRS penalty tax, and surrender charges may apply. Variable annuities are subject to market risk and may lose value. Riders are additional guarantee options that are available to an annuity or life insurance contract holder. While some riders are part of an existing contract, many others may carry additional fees, charges, and restrictions, and the policyholder should review their contract before purchasing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the United States Social Security Administration or any government agency. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or any government agency.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.